Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. I am your host and producer. My name is James Pagashnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous podcasts around the internet, most notably from theathletic.com. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, I was hoping for just a little bit of news over the weekend. I feel like we are trying to catch a major thunderstorm with a solo cup.
Right. Yeah. It's like, throughout the off season, we've got that tiny little solo cup and we're just kind of, we're parched in a desert. We see the news pipeline. We bring the cup over to it and it just like drips out just a tiny bit of water. And we're like, man, this can't sustain us. This is nuts. And then as soon as camp started, someone had just turned the crank and now we're getting blasted full force in the face. Too much content.
There ought to be someone we can complain to about this. I was just hoping for
There ought to be a law.
There ought to be a law. Gosh darn it. Consarn it. Yeah, this is kind of ridiculous. Welcome to this episode of Norse Code. We are back to the weekly stuff right now, it looks like, and we had plenty of things to talk about today. Even if we weren't planning on a show today, a show was going to end up having to happen today. So glad you are along for the ride. There is plenty to talk about, including the rise of Browning. That phrase doesn't really work, but I mean,
it feels like you're like talking about like the importance of searing food.
I mean,
people have come to realize that browning your steaks is a good thing. It makes them taste better.
Yes, the rise of Browning across America, or at least in Eagan, Minnesota, as he is the only quarterback one that we currently have. So we have lots to talk about with the COVID situation for the Vikings, Zimmer's frustration with the team. We have lots of stuff to talk about as far as camp is concerned, and a mailbag as well. But before we start, just want to thank everyone for listening to Norse Code. This is our 8th season. We are now in our 8th year of doing this. We are well over 1 million downloads. We are slowly but surely trying our best to earn that nickname of the #1 podcast for your Minnesota Vikings. And just want to thank you so much for being along for the ride. A couple things before we get started. First things first, the live show is scheduled for Thursday, August 12th. This is the first Minnesota live show that will take place at the Union 32 Craft House after 7 p.m. Arif, myself, Nessie, and more is going to be waiting for those who come out to the live show taping. We have got t-shirts to give away. I have a baby onesie to give away, stickers, and a ticket to the Denver game that is happening that Saturday. So if you are interested in these things, please, please, please head over to the Union 32 Craft House after 7 p.m. on Thursday, August 12th. It'll probably start about 7:30. Just everyone try to get there about 7-ish or so, and we will be over there. So again, Union 32 Craft House after 7 p.m. on Thursday, August 12th. Really looking forward to it. Some of the most fun interactions we've had over the course of the show have been just meeting listeners and hanging out after shows, talking, and then actually like answering questions during the actual show itself. So if you've ever wanted to get into a Twitter argument with Arif, but you just can't seem to bring yourself to create a Twitter account and join the cesspool, have an argument with him in person Thursday, August 12th, over at the Union 32 Craft House. I feel like I sold the Seattle show on something like that too. So go ahead.
And it worked.
It did. That was a packed house. That was a hell of a lot of fun. So please head over to the Union 32 Craft House on August the 12th, the Thursday before the game. Free stuff galore. Also, the fantasy lottery is now open. If you heard the gates of hell open on August 1st, that would have been the sound of me beginning to accept applicants for the lottery that is going to take place soon. We are going to take as many names as we can. These are going to be whittled down into the 4 teams, the 4th team being the one just for Patreon people. And we will now figure out which one of you gets the honor, the joy, and the PTSD from being in a league with a rule for negative 25 points for a kicker that misses an extra point. It is the most fun you can have playing fantasy. Probably? The most frustration you can have while playing fantasy is
certainly you'll have experienced the extreme highs and lows of playing fantasy football.
Extreme. Like, I can't go back to other leagues. I'm not in any leagues that have real rules anymore. Like, the only other league I'm in outside of the Norse Code ones is a league that has this same rule. Like, because I told them I wasn't playing it. I wasn't playing in your league unless we do this. And so this is just how we're doing it. So, again, the fantasy lottery is open. If you would like to join us, if you'd like a chance to join us, rather, you can email norsecodepodcast@gmail.com, and that will get you in. Or you can DM the Norse Code DN Twitter account and just include your email address, and I will put you on the list and just reply back and say, okay, you're in the lottery. Good luck. So no promises on anyone getting in, but if you are a Patreon person, please mention that, and you will enter the drawing twice. So you will have access to both the Patreon only one and the one that's available for everybody. So Arif and I are in like all of the leagues. It's fun. It's ridiculous. And usually we draft around Labor Day. So things to like consider. But this is everything that I hype it up to be. This fantasy league is fun and insane and worth the follow on Twitter, if nothing else. So email norsecodepodcast@gmail.com or DM the Twitter account, NorseCodeDN, and just let me know your email address there. Just put it in the spreadsheet, and I do a little bit of a raffle when it's time to pick the team. So good luck for those who are looking to experience a little bit more hell in their lives. Yeah, let's go with that. Also, if you'd like to get bonus material from us, you can go over to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate Tree50 to help keep the Loch Ness Monster at bay. Bonus episodes are available there. We just put out a bonus episode, including a lovely riff on the existence of Darren Rovell's Twitter account and how he creates content, which was a fun little thing that we did off the top of our heads, and I thoroughly enjoyed it, especially when I went back to edit. So go ahead and take a look at that.
I'm a little alarmed that was recorded, but yeah, sure.
We only talked about... I believe my favorite line was, "You never want to be the second person to tweet out HD video of an assassination from 50 years ago. You never want to be the second person to do that." So
it's a good little bonus episode, I hope.
It is quite enjoyable. I did hear from a couple of people. I warned two of our Patreon people that this was coming, and we got we heard back, or I heard back anyway, that it was enjoyed. So anyway, patreon.com/NorseCode is the best way to get bonus material, or you can go over to paypal.me/NorseCode as well, or norsecode.threadless.com. Go over to the collection section, and there's plenty of stuff on there. There's shirts, there's baby onesies. Masks are now becoming, are back in vogue, so maybe go ahead and get yourself a Norse Code mask. You can get that over at norsecode.threadless.com. All right, I think I'm done shilling, and we can get into the actual show itself, and we can talk about the quarterback situation. This news broke shortly before the NFL Network was going to air the Vikings practice, and this was the worst case scenario for the Vikings, and it ended up playing out in the preseason. It ended up playing out at the very beginning of camp. It almost seemed like this mirrored the situation that happened in, I believe it was Denver. The only positive out of this is that it didn't affect an actual game.
Yeah, although what one can imagine that, setting your team back in terms of like missing a week or potentially even more of practices will set you up to be in a situation where you'll lose more games than you would have otherwise. Right? I mean, the whole point, like if practice didn't make you better, you wouldn't hold it, right? So other teams get to practice for a week with their full offense. The Vikings don't, so this sets them back. We will never be able to identify which loss occurred because of, missing a week of practice, or if one occurs because of it. But, if a game was truly, in the cosmic sense of the odds, a 50-50 game, this would, maybe tip it, 50.8 to 49.2, right? Like, it's all of these small things. So I imagine that that part of Zimmer's response, which we'll talk about in a little bit, was driven by that reality. So yeah, it didn't occur in a game. That's good. It may yet still occur in a game, right? Like, I mean, we've already heard of athletes getting, like Lamar Jackson, I believe, tested positive again for COVID-19. So it is entirely possible to get it twice, right? You know, the distance between positive tests, I don't know. But if instead of Kellen Mond, it's Kirk Cousins who gets it, the exact same scenario, you miss, you know, a number of the quarterbacks in your quarterback room. So it doesn't, like, it's still entirely possible that this could happen again in the game, in a game or during the season. But the Vikings have practiced this potentiality, and hopefully it happening now prevents it from happening in the future. So there's that. I'm going to talk about in a little detail kind of how the protocol was kind of outlined. So Kellen Mond, we don't know if he's vaccinated. There were some reports that he was vaccinated when he tested positive for COVID-19. There have been subsequent reports that he's not vaccinated. The reason it's important to discuss this is because it determines how long Kellen Mond is out. Because if you are vaccinated, it is as soon as you no longer test positive twice with 2 tests 24 hours or more apart. So he could have theoretically been back actually on Monday or you know, which is the day we're recording, or tomorrow, Tuesday, if he's vaccinated and subsequently does end up testing negative at some point. So there's that, right? But if he's unvaccinated, you have to wait longer, right? You have to wait 5 days, I believe, if you test positive. Maybe it's 10. 10 if you test positive, and then you have to have 2 subsequent tests. Whereas if you're a high-risk contact, you can only be a high-risk contact if you're unvaccinated. So if you're vaccinated and you've had contact with somebody who's had a positive test, doesn't matter. You can practice the next day. So that's exactly what happened with Jake Browning, who was vaccinated. That's been confirmed by Mike Zimmer, by Jake Browning, and by the implication of the protocol, which is that he was able to participate right away despite being in the quarterback room. So that means that it's going to be a while before we see Kellen Mond for sure, and it's going to be a little bit less time unless they end up testing positive, less time until we see Kirk Cousins and Nate Stanley. So they've got 5 days and they have to test negative twice in a 24-hour, with the 24-hour difference between the 2 negative tests. So yeah, that's what happened. So we found out like 20 minutes before the Mike Zimmer presser, which so we pool our transcription efforts. So when we go to a presser, you know, the beat reporters will figure out kind of what part of the presser they'll transcribe. And I was assigned, you know, the first half of Mike Zimmer that time. And so I had to get there pretty soon. And I found out right before I left that, you know, this all happened, that Tom Pelissero breaks this report that Kellen Mond tests positive and that Kirk Cousins is a high-risk contact. He's not going to be there, and that the only quarterback available is going to be Jake Browning. And so I have to like speed over, and I was already running a little bit late, so I have to speed over and make it to the Mike Zimmer presser. I ended up missing the first couple of words of the presser, actually. I was like that close. And that's kind of where and that's where I learned kind of more of the details, right? So yeah, the protocol for an unvaccinated person is fairly kind of easy. So for a vaccinated person is fairly easy so long as you end up testing negative. For a unvaccinated person, there's just kind of a lot more hoops you have to jump through. I think I covered everything that needs to be covered in kind of this part of the discussion, but that ended up forcing, you know, Jake Browning to take the entire practice.
And let's be honest, this is a situation that Browning was not expecting, and he is vaccinated, and he played fairly well. He was in a situation with all the ones, and he, you know, completed a couple of passes. It wasn't a perfect display or anything. He is of course Jake Browning, but he was doing well, and then the rest of the team was kind of doing what they could. But this does put the Minnesota Vikings in a ugly situation, and they had to go and hire some quarterbacks so that they can play with the second and thirds.
Yeah, and I evaluated kind of more in depth what I thought of Jake Browning's play over at the Athletic. Yeah, overall, I'd say he had a good night. I do want to say he still looked like a backup. Like he still did not look like somebody you want to start over a 16 game season or anything like that. So there is that for sure. But he played better than I expected based off of how he's been performing in minicamp and prior to that, especially kind of in the second half of practice. But the Vikings did end up working out a number of players. They worked out Cole McDonald, former Hawaii quarterback, which would have been very fun because he's very good in front of a mic. He's just kind of a fun guy. He's got a weird throwing motion. Jared Erdman from St. John's. I'm sure there's a Johnny listening right now that's like really ticked off that I can't. I remember his it's at Jury Dude. So hopefully that helps. He worked out, and then the Vikings also worked out Case Cookus, a real name. I would never make fun of someone's name. They can't control that. But boy, is that a name that you would not expect to see. Case Cookus.
Yeah, boy. I enjoyed that. I think we got two two messages to the mailbag today that were just Case Cookus ?
Case Cookus. That's my answer. No, so he's a former Northern Arizona quarterback. He spent 2 seasons, or he had 2 seasons with season-ending injuries at Northern Arizona. Reasonable statistics. The scouting was, I haven't actually watched him, right? The scouting reports I see from like NFL.com has like a scouting report on, which is honestly surprising. Good job, Lance Zierlein, for like going out and getting that scouting report. Like, holy crap. But Emory Hunt also tweeted a scouting report. Let's see if I can find that, because Emory Hunt is like, so he's at F-Ball Game Plan, and he is just like so good about making sure that he's got all these small school scouting reports and stuff like that. So he's like pretty on the ball when it comes to this sort of stuff. So he didn't give Cookus an above 75 grade in any particular quality, but his highest quality was ball velocity. So there's arm strength and ball velocity, which were 2 different things for him. And also the second highest quality was awareness. So 74 velocity, 73 awareness, 72 arm strength. Plays 70 situational football, 64 athleticism, and so on. So I'll link the Case Cookus scouting report in the show notes. Can't believe I forgot the words for show notes. But the things that Emory Hunt liked were that, generally speaking, his accuracy at all levels was above average, but more consistent at the intermediate level. He's got a quick release and he's a quick decision maker. And he's not, he doesn't hesitate to make tight window throws. But, he missed a number of seasons. His mechanics can go awry, and that'll like hurt his accuracy. And he can be a little bit streaky in placement. He compared him actually to Sam Bradford. And I hope that's because of the 2 full seasons of missing because of injuries. That sounds great. He did win an award for being the top freshman in FCS, though. So go Cookus. The other guy they got was Danny Etling, who's a former LSU quarterback. So I asked a Patriots guy who breaks down quarterbacks for a living. You could probably guess who it is if you're as poisoned about following people on football Twitter as I am. But he's a quarterback guy who primarily covers the Patriots, which has got to have made his job super boring over the last 2 decades. Like, I'm glad that
nothing but complaints.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So Etling largely has pretty good touch on a vertical. Well, so first he said he sucks. Wait, we don't swear on this particular podcast, do we? He sucks was the response, plus a couple of swear words. Etling, by the way, former Patriots guy. So I want to put that out there. So he was not particularly impressed with Danny Etling, which should not shock anyone because he's not on a roster. So he was available. But he had a pro-style offense at LSU. He was able to get rid of the ball quickly, both at LSU and in Patriots camp. He's got a little bit of awareness, and his touch on deep and intermediate passes is pretty good. At LSU, he protected the football fairly well, and he's got decent pocket movement. His combine testing was really poor. Not very much agility, not very much speed, a 4.76 40 time, but his play on the field showed a little bit more athleticism than that, enough that the Patriots briefly converted him to tight end, which of course tells you two things. One, he must not have been very good at quarterback. Two, he's got some decent athleticism, right? His production overall at LSU was not great, and they've had a couple of good receivers over the years, so kind of concerning, especially because how good his particular offensive line was. And his throwing motion's a little bit slower, and his awareness is just not quite there. So, in some ways, a little bit of the opposite of Jake Browning. He's got a better arm. He's more likely to be able to be accurate deep. He is less accurate short and intermediate than Browning is. He doesn't make decisions as quickly. His throwing motion's also not as quick, so the ball is going to take a little bit of time to get out. But he's got a little bit more movement capability. So, yeah. That's Danny Etling. I can't imagine either of them will be on the roster in a week and a half, but you can't just have the one quarterback throw 100 friggin' passes.
Nope. That is one of the reasons why you have so many quarterbacks going into camp, and why it is a bit devastating to have nearly everyone have to go away because of a COVID slip. And let's get into the Zimmer stuff right now, because the Zimmer stuff has kind of become the bigger story. Like, people can be upset about Kirk Cousins and his stance on the vaccine stuff. You can do that. You can also say, well, it's his choice. He doesn't have to do it. Again, you can do that. But the boss is stuck here in a situation that is kind of recognized as like one of his last shots in Minnesota. And he has several high-profile people on his team that are refusing to do this, which is only making his life more difficult as far as, being able to plan things, as far as game day stuff. It does highly, the way the system is set up, it does highly incentivize players to be vaccinated. And you can tell from all of the pressers that he is slowly but surely losing his patience with this situation.
I don't know about slowly.
Well,
but definitely surely.
It was a slow burn on Saturday, and then today he's outright inviting the press to go wait in the parking lot tomorrow morning to see who's waiting in their car for their COVID test and who isn't. Like, you don't get much more like, I am too old for this, like, than that.
Yeah. It was incredible. So, like, yeah, I mean, there's just so much. So, like, Saturday night, like, his quotes were pretty, I wouldn't say anodyne, right? They were still pretty out there. He was still, like, pretty clearly ticked off. But, he was talking about, like, something like this happens a day before the game that has a chance to get into the playoffs, or something like this. This Delta variant is rough. You can see the cases going up every single day now. That's why, for the sake of everybody's health, I think it's important, but some people don't understand, I guess. And then when asked, is this maybe a potential wake-up call to some people on the team to get vaccinated, he goes, well, I mean, how do you know? Some guys are pretty staunch. Are you mad about this? Are you accepting that, some players are just not going to get vaccinated? How do you feel? Quite honestly, after everything we went through last year, I'm not surprised one bit. I'm disappointed that this happened. I'm frustrated, not just with my football players who didn't get vaccinated, but I'm frustrated with everybody. We'll just do the best we can. It's just disappointing. So, he threw some shots, right? He said, Jake's really smart. He's vaccinated. That helps if you're going to be the backup. So as we move forward here, he's going to get a ton of reps. But yeah, it was very, like, he was passive aggressive, but he was very, like, frustrated. And then you go to the presser that he had earlier today. Again, we're recording on Monday, August 2nd. And he was absolutely, like, I wouldn't say like aggressive or like, but he was like livid, right? First he was like, he praised Browning for, how good the practice was, and stuff like that. He was sad about missing BC Johnson, who, by the way, camp update, towards ACL. So he's going to be out, probably for the season. It was a non-contact injury. And it sucks, but that's something else to add. But yeah, he was a lot more aggressive about it. He's more assertive. I've talked to the team about it, about some of the things going on. Our guys have been pretty good about it, really. I'm probably the most vocal out of all of them. I just feel like we're going to have guys miss games. There's so many cases going on right now. We're going to have guys miss some games, and we have to be prepared for it. And so that was like the least assertive he was. And then, we ask like, will Saturday change their mind? Well, every day, one or two, well, not every day, but once in a while, one player will come in or two players will come in and say, I want to be vaccinated. So hopefully that continues on. But I know there are just some here that just won't do it. Do you want to tell the unvaccinated players to do it? I talked to the team, and like I said before, there are quite a few guys that are just against it. I'm not going to be able to change their mind. So it's like half the country, I guess. Oh, wow. I'm like, okay.
Zimmer's got that 2 days away from retirement look on his face too when he's doing this.
Yeah. What about, so what specifically about your thoughts on losing a quarterback or a star player before a big game? Well, if that happens, I probably won't be happy that we lost the game first. I probably won't be happy we could have prevented this. Like I said, these guys, some of them just won't do it. I shouldn't say it, but some of the things they read is just woof out there. Are you talking about misinformation? It's their beliefs. So I don't know if it's misinformation. It's their belief. So whatever they've heard or read or been told, not from, maybe they don't believe what Dr. Sills in the NFL is telling them either. So it's just like, and then he was asked like, is this going to affect kind of the leadership dynamic in the locker room where, if you got team leaders that are unvaccinated, and the rest of the team, largely is vaccinated, does that kind of affect the leadership dynamic that maybe, if they miss games or something like that? And he goes, no, I don't think the leadership dynamic's been affected. If some leaders miss games and we lose those games, that might. Man, I mean, he was just throwing heaters out there. Like, he was mad about the players kind of reading, misinformation, although he can't say that, I guess. He's mad about the players just not getting vaccinated and potentially having to miss games because of it. Like, yeah, he was just angry. And like, I wrote part of the Athletic news story on it, and someone in the replies or in the comments was just like, Zimmer's really only saying this because the league is kind of telling him to say it. And we won't really know his actual thoughts because this is kind of a mandate from above. And it's like, I don't know. The Vikings didn't put out a video, but I imagine that video played on NFL Network, on local news and stuff like that. If you ever watched the video, that's very clearly not it. He clearly believes this stuff. And it's not just from the literal words that he's saying. And it's very clear from the words that he's saying that he doesn't believe it. It's from his tone of voice, right? It's from, him hesitating before he can just kind of go all out and berate, the players that are unvaccinated or whatever. It's from just the look on his face. Like, it's not very hard to tell. Like, he's probably one of the most stringent coaches in the NFL right now in terms of trying to, or publicly pleading essentially for his players to get vaccinated. Like, there's just a number of players on the team that, you would consider, key players that are not vaccinated. And if they end up missing games because of it, that's going to be a big problem. And I do want to mention something here. It'll probably pop up in the mailbag too. I do want to mention something here that there's some, so for people who want other people to get vaccinated, like me, right? And for a lot of the people that follow me on Twitter and stuff like that, I think that we shouldn't be sacrificing some of the critical thinking skills that are really important here, because I think that's happening a little bit on kind of every side of the debate. One thing that does pop up is that when we say Kirk misses a game because he's not vaccinated, right? Because he didn't test positive, right? Like, if this exact same scenario happens again week 3 and Kirk misses a game, he would miss a game, and the immediate reason is because he's not vaccinated, right? Because he didn't test positive. But the sub-immediate reason, or essentially the next reason up the chain of causality, is because the protocols require him to miss the game, right? And people who want players to have the choice, I think in the most generous framing of that argument, will point out it's not that, it's the protocols that are at fault. And I think that's not a bad argument. I think that pointing to kind of the system that creates the rules that govern behavior is more at fault, quote unquote, than a person, right, who doesn't follow the rules. I think that's abstractly true. And if anyone follows like kind of my political beliefs or any of the takes that I put on various political podcasts, that's true. I think that's true here too. The thing is, the better argument is that you should accept that and just say, yes, and the protocols are correct. Like, you just have to say it's important that those protocols are in place for X, Y, and Z reasons, right? So the NFL is attempting to prevent an outbreak among their players, especially among a much more virulent strain. It's also important that they send a public signal. But also, like, even if the players are healthy, which there seems to be this kind of agreement that players are like healthy and therefore they're not in any high risk groups, which, I mean, that's, first of all, like, we know of athletes, right, that have contracted COVID, that have suffered long-term effects from contracting COVID. So, for example, like the most famous football example, I think, is Von Miller.
Yeah, Von Miller is the one that immediately jumps to mind.
Yeah, who was dealing like month after he no longer tested positive, with shortness of breath, and it was difficult for him to work out and stuff like that. And you take a look at some of the reports of lung scarring from people who suffer from COVID, and that's like going to be a lifelong issue. Like, that tissue doesn't rebuild quickly enough or at all enough for you to be able to live the same kind of life with the same kind of lung capacity that you would have before. Like, if you want a vacation after you're retired, now you can't go to high altitude places as much, right? Or something along those lines. But also, people seem to have forgotten, like, Raquel Armstead for the Jaguars, for example, lost an entire season because of COVID-19. An entire season, right? Like, he tested positive in training camp, and then he landed on the COVID reserve list then, and then he landed on the list again in September, and he was hospitalized twice with significant respiratory issues, right? We don't know if he's going to suffer long-term consequences as a result, but, you know, being hospitalized, like, that sucks. Like, you just don't want to do it. Like, even if he doesn't suffer a long-term consequence, people seem to think that, like, in every other area, people seem to think that health is important in every respect, as it pertains to your quality of life, as it pertains to longevity, as it pertains to your ability to engage in any of the activities that you want to. And then we define health in a very broad sense, right? Like, you can be unhealthy because you experience back pain. You can be unhealthy because you can't remember things like you used to. Your memory's degenerating. You can be unhealthy because you've got a respiratory illness. You can be unhealthy because, like, you physically can't do the same things that you used to do before, that you're disabled in some way, either temporarily or permanently. Those are all indicators of health. And then beyond that, there's also healthy for mental illness reasons, right? And we think of health both in terms of our ability to interact with the world around us and in terms of finitude, in terms of death. But when we talk about COVID-19, for some reason, a lot of us only think about health in terms of death. And that doesn't make any sense. If you suffer health consequences because of COVID-19, then that means it was not safe for you to get it. It impacted your health, period. It impacted your quality of life. I don't want to spend months in a hospital. That sounds like torture. That's what happened to Raquel Armstead. And so this idea that because players aren't likely to die as a result of COVID-19, and which is a super dangerous fire to be playing with anyway, but it is therefore not a concern, is toxic, and it's crazy, and we don't know what kind of long-term health effects. You know, there's more research being done into something called long COVID, essentially, which they're trying to determine the severity and the veracity of it, right? But like, that's something that you kind of have to deal with, and people are going to react in different ways. Some people are going to be completely asymptomatic and not have to worry about it. Most people, right? And that's great. But a significant enough number of people who are in a cohort that would typically not be considered at higher risk are going to experience consequences, are going to impact the quality of life. And you don't want that, right? Like, we would not be talking about CTE if we didn't think that the long-term consequences of our health mattered, right? And so the idea that we can have a conversation about the immediate death, like risk of death for COVID, and that's the end point of our discussion about the risk of a disease, that's nuts to me. And then the second part of that is that we do a very poor job of discussing health when it comes to athletes, because athletes can be very athletic and fit and have a lot of stamina and not be healthy. This is pretty true of a lot of offensive and defensive linemen, because it is generally not healthy, even if you're fit. Even if you've got, you can run a 4.99 second 40-yard dash at 350 pounds. That doesn't mean you don't have some indicators of poor health. Michael Pierce has asthma, right? Like, he's not a completely healthy individual. Now, it sounds like, COVID-19 doesn't affect people with asthma nearly as much, although, again, that was a complicating factor for Von Miller, I think. But we don't know what underlying health conditions an athlete might have. If you have sickle cell anemia, which a number of players either have the trait or if you have the disease, it's much more difficult. But some players have the trait. It makes it difficult for them to play in Denver or Mexico City, right? It affects the ability of oxygen of your blood cells to carry oxygen because of the shape of your blood cells, right? Well, that sounds like that could have an interaction, maybe, I don't know, with a respiratory illness, right? Like, there's all kinds of underlying conditions. Like the Patriots, for example, when they cut a player who had diabetes, there was like a little dust up about it. But like, you can play in the NFL and have diabetes. Jay Cutler did it, right? Is that a complicating condition? I don't know, maybe. But like, there's all kinds of things where you would not consider someone healthy if they had this list of conditions or this list of potential risks. That just because they run fast, now suddenly they're not a health risk. Like, there's so many dimensions to health that the idea that someone is good at football, they're automatically healthy, is just also crazy. So that's like part two. Part three, of course, is that they can spread it to people who are at higher risk that are in their contact kind of circle. And like, that matters too. Like, we should care about other people. That's like the whole point of a society. So yeah, sorry there's like a rant in the middle of this, but like, this has been filling my mentions on and on and on and on. Just wanted to go on about it. Like, most people listening to this podcast probably already agree with me, but like, absolutely wild. Anyway, training camp.
Yeah. So there's been.
It's just like it's been blasting into my head because I'm permanently online and I'm on Twitter all the time, and so my mentions are just filled with people that are like, yeah, the players are fine. Why should they have to worry? And it's like, buddy, you don't know any of these players.
Well, look at Washington. Look at the Washington football team and Rivera, who's pleading.
The least vaccinated team in the league, by the way.
Yeah, he's pleading with his players, being like, you realize I survived cancer last year, and even
I'm immunocompromised.
Yeah.
And like, they're just not. And also, former NFL safety TJ Ward blamed him for having cancer, and he's like, don't put that on us. And it's like, dude, first of all, you're not even in the NFL right now. Shut the hell up. But second, do you just blame someone for their cancer? It's not like he had lung cancer because he smoked, right? And TJ Ward like went on to explain, like, cancer runs in my family, like many American families, but also bad diets and cigarettes do. And it's just like, buddy, just because someone, I don't even like, there's so like, he was like, yeah, your brain short circuits when you hear the word cancer. And it's like, so is your contention that we should not be sympathetic to a cancer survivor? Like, is that the argument you're making? Because sometimes some people can sometimes engage in risky behaviors that can somewhat exacerbate, or in the case of smoking, massively exacerbate the risk of cancer. Like, is that the argument that you have? Because like, that's inhumane.
Yeah, I'd love to sit and talk with him and be like, well, listen, my great grandpa died of colon cancer. My grandpa died of colon cancer. My mom caught colon cancer early enough to not die from it. And I've been getting colonoscopies since my early 30s. So when I eventually get this, is it my fault? Like,
right. James, you should have put on more sunscreen.
I guess I should have done something about the colon cancer that's just bound to get me. Like, I don't, that's just ridiculous. Yeah, we were joking in some pre-show stuff about like victim blaming and everything. I don't even think like you could, that might not even be strong enough for that.
Right. Yeah. Right. And like, I don't, that's nuts. So he's immunocompromised. Right. And so, it wouldn't like I don't think that he can get the vaccine. And there's just going to be people that can't for whatever reason, which is also why I don't like yell at people when they're not vaccinated. For example, Coach Vass, for example, somebody follow on Twitter, really amazing follow, by the way. A fantastic podcast called Make Defense Great Again, which is really great in terms of breaking down defenses, has college and sometimes NFL defensive coordinators on to talk about that. I would strongly recommend listening to the podcast. So he's not vaccinated and he came down with COVID-19 and he's experiencing, it sounds like some pretty big symptoms. And so he's having a really rough time of it. And so a bunch of people started yelling at him on Twitter. And it turns out the reason he's not vaccinated. So first of all, he's advocated that people get vaccinated. He's wanted to get the vaccine as quickly as possible, as soon as he can, but he talked to his doctor and he apparently has some risk factors in his history. And so he needed to get a bunch of blood work done and a bunch of testing done before his doctor and he felt that it was appropriate for him to get a vaccine. Okay, great. Unfortunately, that was going to be done on August 10th. And he came down with COVID like 8 days before that, which is just really sad. And he's going through a really rough time of it. But in the meantime, a bunch of people were just yelling at him on Twitter when his own doctor gave him medical advice that at the moment, evaluating the risk factors here, it might potentially be more risky to give you the vaccine before we kind of know what impact it'll have based on your unique medical history. And yeah, I mean, like in retrospect, he says, maybe I shouldn't have listened to the doctor and gotten the vaccine, but that's kind of an insane thing to think at the time. So like, I don't yell at people if they're not vaccinated, right? Like I'm not yelling at Cousins or Thielen or Sheldon Richardson, I guess, specifically, but like at large, there's a 30% of the NFL isn't, well, I guess it's 85% of it have at least had one shot. 15% of the NFL hasn't had at least one shot. Like the broad population here, that's an issue. So like, yeah. And also like there's a number of players near the bottom of roster. So I don't know, for example, if Nate Stanley, right, has a legitimate medical reason to not get vaccinated, but it's going to impact his ability to be a fourth string quarterback to make the practice squad. It just is. There's no two ways around it. It sounds like, and Mike Zimmer very strongly implied that every quarterback that they worked out, he is vaccinated. There's a reason for that, right? And so it's either very unfortunate that Nate Stanley was forced into this choice or dumb. Those are probably your two best options. But man, that's ridiculous, right? So yeah, there's a lot of players near the bottom of rosters that aren't vaccinated. And that sounds like it's either very unfortunate or a really poor business decision. So yeah, wild to me that the Washington football team is the least vaccinated team in the league and their coach is immunocompromised. There could be one or two players in that roster that maybe, like it's pretty rare, that could have a medical interaction that would prevent them from getting vaccinated. It's pretty rare, so it's probably not more than one or two.
Yeah, Rivera has that look on his face of like one breakout and I'm out of here. Like, yeah, I can't
believe you all want to kill me is what it sounds. Well, yeah. They've already got like a number of people. They've got like the second or third most people on the COVID-19 reserve list too.
Yeah. So it's pretty ridiculous. But this has all overshadowed the opening of camp and the play of certain individuals. Someone I want to just to mention because he is getting all sorts of accolades out there is Justin Jefferson, who apparently is just catching everything out there. I watched the YouTube stream that they had put out, and he was compensating for an underthrown catch with just relative ease, and was fun to watch. But Justin Jefferson is apparently out there just balling out of control.
Yeah, he looks great. I mean, he lost like a contested catch or two, so he's not like pristine, perfect 100%, but he was great. Great on the deep stuff, was able to stack defensive backs and create exclusive real estate for himself. Really great at tracking the ball. Like you said, so natural at kind of adjusting to passes. Like Browning threw a pass like way over his head, and he did a really excellent job. I think this was in the night practice. He did an excellent job on that out, just kind of reaching out for it, grabbing it, and pulling it back down. Just like really phenomenal ball tracking, really great route running to get open. Like he's like continuously just like open. Like there's that Twitter clip of him burning Cameron Dancer. He's not always that open, But he's continuously open against like Patrick Peterson, against Cameron Dantzler, against Rashad Breeland. It doesn't matter. He's doing a really great job of finding ways to get open. He's doing a great job of reeling in passes. And the only catches he hasn't caught really are the ones that are contested. And he's won a decent share of those too. So, Justin Jefferson's having a really great game.
Well, let's talk about some position battles. Let's ignore the quarterback position for a moment sure. because that just seems unfair. But let's talk about wide receiver, because with Olabisi Johnson going out, it is a bit open, and the fact that the new signee has not gone out and played yet, this still seems open for wide receiver 3 and possibly 4.
Yeah, Dede Westbrook hasn't really participated in a lot of individual drills, and I don't believe he's participated in any team drills as he continues to recover from his ACL injury from last year. He is still out there very often. You'll really only see him do stuff like catch punts and punt return. And it sounds like he's the favorite for that. But yeah, we've got a wide receiver position battle that's wide open. At the moment, it seems like, and I want to qualify this appropriately, that KJ Osborne is going to win it. It's not just because the coaches talked him up. It's not just because there's been a subsequent kind of media response to kind of pay attention to him, talk him up, figure out when he's doing something good and highlighting that. If you only watched Osborne during a practice, which it's your time, you do what you want, but like that seems weird. But if that's what you did, you'd probably come away with the idea that he's probably the third wide receiver at the moment. Like, he's playing really quite well. He did not play anything like this last year. He did not look like he was ready to play at all. And it was very easy for me to report that because my draft take on him was pretty negative. I thought that the Vikings were not smart to spend a 5th round pick on him. And now it looks like they're going to come out ahead on this. Now, we do have to remember a previous 5th round return pick, a special teams pick in Stacey Coley, who early on in one of the camps was having a really good camp. I don't know if it was this good, but it is reminiscent of being that good. So, nothing's set in stone yet, but as of right now, the information we have tells us that Osborne is playing really well. Other than that, I think that the next guy that's playing well is probably Ihmir Smith-Marsette. He's playing a little bit better than I expected. Blake Proehl is doing all right. Saw a couple of drops from Whop Phillier. Don't think that he's playing particularly well, but not particularly poorly. Dan Chisna, again, does not look like he plays receiver, which is like kind of true. So like, whatever. And then Chad Beebe is kind of difficult to figure out. He's not getting as many reps, not for like he's low on the depth chart reasons, but just, for whatever situational reasons. He doesn't look bad, but he doesn't look like he's going to beat out KJ Osborne for that third wide receiver spot at the moment. So right now it seems like Osborne is going to be that guy until Dede Westbrook comes back. And, Westbrook has a couple of 700-yard seasons or 600-yard seasons under his belt. So he's got a history of production that suggests that he might be pretty good.
Well, how is running back looking? It's just a couple of backups out there, though.
Yeah, and it's always difficult to evaluate running backs. I paid particular attention to them today during a couple of drills. I think that Jake Vargas, the fullback backup, is a pretty good blocker, which is kind of fun. But B, Alexander Madison looks faster a little bit. He looks like he's much more likely to be able to break something out. Maybe he's a little bit smaller. I don't know. And maybe that's why he's a little bit faster, but he definitely looks like a more complete running back right now, which is kind of cool. Kenny Nwangu looks like, he's just obviously fast. Like, when he plays, he just has a different level of speed than a lot of other people. Like, he doesn't look as fast as like Tyreek Hill. Like, when you talk to a Chiefs beat reporter about what Tyreek Hill looks like in practice, they're just like, they just start speaking in mythology, right? They just start speaking as if like, Hermes descended from heaven and joined a football team. Like, Tyreek Hill looks otherworldly fast, and maybe he does, right? But that's not really how fast Kenny Nwangu looks, but he looks like very obviously faster than almost everyone else there. So that's pretty cool. From what I'm seeing, he looks actually a little bit more natural at running back than I expected. So that's kind of cool. And maybe, he'll be able to beat Amir Abdullah outright for that third running back spot. So running back, that's probably kind of the take. And Dalvin Cook looks, they're not giving him that much. So what he does do, he seems to do well.
Yeah, from all reports and from watching online, it didn't look like they were giving him much of anything to do, as you would expect with somebody with that level of talent, that level of contract. The first week of training camp, you're probably not going to be stacking the box or anything on him. So, nope. Well, people who've listened to this show long enough know that the offensive line, or have been Vikings fans for long enough, know that the offensive line was a flaming garbage can last year. How is it looking so far in camp?
Not wonderful.
Is the fire at least out, or are we adding to it?
Boy, it's a different color. How about that?
We found the pizza boxes in it. We're burning off the fat here, folks.
Yeah, okay. So Christian Darrisaw still hasn't participated in a team drill yet, or even anything. He's just been kind of watching. So he's still kind of recovering from the offseason surgery that he had. So we haven't seen him at all. Wyatt Davis was injured for the Saturday practice, and I don't recall seeing him for Monday's practice, even though Zimmer said that he might be able to get out here. So I didn't see him. But as a result of Rashad Hill, for whatever reason, not being able to participate, which I assume is an injury-related reasons. He's had like injury-related problems in training camp before. I think this might be his third consecutive year even. They ended up having to move Oli Udoh to left tackle, which he's been rotating in at right guard with Dakota Dozier as the potential candidate to start. And Dakota Dozier's been playing right guard. So Oli Udoh is like not better than Danielle Hunter. I'm sorry to say. Like Danielle Hunter, when he does line up against the left tackle, which is not necessarily all that often, but when he does line up against the left tackle, he's been putting the work on Oli Udoh. So there's that. I saw Patrick Jones do a pretty decent job getting past Oli Udoh at left tackle. I mean, he just might be a right-sided player. He played right tackle in college. He was playing right guard in camp. So it just might be like kind of a left-hand, right-hand thing. But yeah, that did not look good. There were a bunch of sacks that didn't count. So quarterback could still throw the ball and stuff like that. Patrick Jones, I thought, has looked pretty good. But like Dakota Dozier, he'll get bulldozed. I saw who briefly, Drew Samia just got like run over, which I don't think is news for anybody. But yeah, that interior offensive line does not look good. Ezra Cleveland, here's good news. Ezra Cleveland looks a lot better than I expected. He seems to be playing well from the few moments that I get to watch him. And he's going up against some pretty good players. So that's good. Maybe he actually is a left guard in the NFL, and maybe I was wrong about him. So that's cool. You don't get a ton of information on centers, so I don't really have much to report on Garrett Bradbury. Brown and Neal is still getting used to Danielle Hunter's speed. So when it's Jalen Holmes, or it's not Jalen Holmes, when it's Stephen Weatherly against him, he's fine. When it's Danielle Hunter, he needs to catch up. If he plays like this during the season, that's not good. But Danielle Hunter looks friggin' otherworldly right now.
Well, there's also talk about the tight ends and how they're playing. I believe Irv Smith is getting a little bit of attention.
Yeah, Irv Smith looks good. He looks a little bit better than I expected, which is nice. You don't see as much of like the seam stretching stuff that you'd like to. He had a good one against Eric Hendricks that got tweeted out by Score North, I think. Plus, he's doing a much better job on the red zone than he has in the past, so that's nice. Still pretty good as a blocker. Like they were doing some run blocking drills, and I was watching it, and like he was the only tight end that was like consistently holding up against these defensive ends. Which that included Stephen Weatherly, that included Patrick Jones, that included Janarius Robinson. It even included Danielle Hunter, at a time, and DJ Wonnum at a time. So he looks good as a run blocker, and he looks like he is more than fit as a receiving option. He doesn't look like he's breaking out. Like he doesn't look like a Darren Waller, right? Like in Raiders camp from Hard Knocks, and then subsequently like 1,000-yard season or whatever he had. But he looks good. Tyler Conklin, same thing. I don't think that he looks great as a run blocker. But I think he's separated himself pretty cleanly from the tight ends below him. Brandon Dillon, Zach Davidson, Shane Zylstra. Zach Davidson, I mean, another guy that looks better than I expected, but the bar I had for him was so low that it's still not good. Like, you're ahead of where I thought you were. You still don't look like you're ready to play NFL football. He doesn't look like he's blocking very well at all. It doesn't look like he's doing a great job getting open routes. Like, I was watching tight end linebacker one-on-ones, and it's a drill that's meant to favor the offense because linebackers or defenses typically have the ability to hand off and have help and stuff like that. And so when you give one receiver the entire 53 and a half or 53 and a third yards to get open, when they're up against one of the guy, they'll probably get open. And Zach Davidson was having a lot of trouble doing that. Whereas Irv Smith got open pretty easily. Tyler Conklin got open pretty easily. Shane Zylstra got open pretty easily. Zach Davidson was having a lot of trouble. So he seems behind. But I think Conklin and Smith look good.
Is there somebody on the offensive side of the ball that seemed to be like the biggest surprise to you other than the fact that Browning is throwing dimes out there? Well, not just, but other than the fact that Browning is out there taking all the first team reps?
I mean, KJ Osborne, so if I'm going to rank the surprises, KJ Osborne's number one in terms of positive play. Ezra Cleveland might be number two. I want to pay more attention when the pads come on. So everything I'm saying about these defensive and offensive linemen and run blocking, take with a grain of salt because the pads aren't on yet. But yeah, so Cleveland 2. I guess Browning is 3. So like the way Browning is playing, he's playing better than I expected, but he's not coming for Kirk's job. Like he's just not. Like some of these deep balls will die. Some of them are just off the mark completely. He's still overthrowing some intermediate throws. Like he's playing much better than you expect a backup to play in the same situation. But like he does not look like a starter. So I don't want to like put it out there that he's the biggest surprise so far of camp. But like I would say on offense, he's probably the third best positive surprise.
And before the COVID issue came up, there was talk about how well Mond was doing, or that he was looking halfway decent out there. I'm not sure that anyone was expecting him to end up being QB2 by week 1 or anything.
I actually disagree with that. I think Mond has looked bad. Sorry.
Go on and expound on that. I'm going off of a couple of accounts. But what have you seen as far as Kellen Mond before the COVID issue?
Yeah, I don't think that there's a single day where he's been consistently accurate. Like he's had a pretty deep ball or two. There's a nice one to Amir Smith-Marset, for example. But yeah, for the most part, especially intermediate. He's either just not on the same page. So I shouldn't say necessarily accurate. Either he's just not on the same page as everybody else on the offense, or he's not accurate. He is checking down a lot more than even Jake Browning, which is consistent with his scouting report. But also consistent was his ability to kind of hit these intermediate targets. He's not doing that. Like he's rifling the ball in there. And it's nice for him to get past tight coverage, but it's just not reaching the players where they need to get the ball. So I think that he's just not playing very well. That I don't think says anything about the Vikings pick or anything like that. He supposed to play this year, so you could take a KJ Osborne like leap in terms of capability next year. But I think he's playing very poorly. I don't think there's anything stopping Jake Browning from being quarterback 2. I think that is, barring injury, about as set as stone as you can say about any position battle in camp.
Yeah. Well, let's look at D-line then. How is everything looking over there?
Pretty good, which, maybe that says something about the offensive line, but for the most part, pretty good. I don't see Dalvin Tomlinson in the backfield that much, so if he's a pass rusher, we have yet to see it. Armin Watson's been participating a lot because Michael Pierce has not been doing a ton of team drills. He's been doing more and more as we get kind of through camp, but he hasn't done all of it yet. And that's because of a calf injury that he had suffered apparently 3 weeks before camp, I guess. So he's kind of rehabbing that. So we're not seeing a ton of him, but Armin Watson has been playing kind of in his stead. So Dalvin Tomlinson continues to play the kind of 3 technique role. I don't really see him in the backfield all that much. Sheldon Richardson's doing a good job. James Lynch is doing actually a fairly respectable job as well. And Herkes Mataafa is showing up every so often. So defensive tackle, you're getting some pass penetration. I don't know that the run defense from the defensive tackle group is there yet. But again, pads aren't on yet, so we'll see. As for the edge rushing stuff, DJ Wonnum looks like he wants to be Danielle Hunter. I mean, he is like muscled up. Like he is just, I mean, he looks great. He's had some moments in camp too, which is nice. I haven't checked to see if it's like consistent or if he's just like kind of popping out when he's popping out and I'm noticing that, but he's had some nice moments. I based off of the moments I saw of him playing well, I would say that he's having a better camp than Stephen Weatherly, right? But I haven't paid attention to him as I have the two draft picks, Patrick Jones, or the two rookies, Patrick Jones and Jarius Robinson. I think Patrick Jones is doing really well. It's really nice to see him play this well this early. Danielle Hunter mentioned that Jones is ahead of where he was when he was a rookie. That might be true from like a technical finesse perspective, like in terms of the ability to string some pass rush moves together. But like, yeah, I remember Danielle Hunter as a rookie. I mean, that dude just like rocketed off the ball. And that's not really what Patrick Jones is doing, but I think that he looks actually pretty decent. Stephen Weatherly looks all right. Mostly it's his competition. So like when he goes up against Rashad Hill, it's a lot less impressive than when he goes up against Oli Udoh. But I'm pretty excited by the group behind him. Actually, I think that they're playing to a higher level than I expect. I'm saying that a lot, but there are a lot of players that are disappointing me, like Stephen Weatherly, like Oli Udoh at left tackle, like Zach Davidson or Brandon Dillon or whatever. So I am saying this player is playing better than I expected, but there are a lot of players that have not lived up to my expectations. I'm just talking more about the ones that I like.
Well, let's talk about the corners.
Well, there you go.
Yep, here we go.
And you nailed it. Patrick Peterson looks slow. He doesn't look bad. He kind of, the whole thing altogether kind of looks like what I expected, honestly. Like, the longer a play runs, the worse it is. Like, Justin Jefferson has been able to crack open against him on a consistent basis. Adam Thielen's doing a pretty good job against him. He's competitive. He's getting in there. He's attacking the ball and stuff like that, but he just does not look like a shutdown corner. Is he worth $10 million? We're not going to find out obviously until the season starts, but early impressions to me are probably not, which sucks because like he's pretty charismatic in front of the podium. I'd like him to stay in Minnesota for a while. Like just from a media perspective, but from a playing perspective, like I don't really see it yet. Dancer's getting worked. There's a bunch of highlights where the guy covering the guy is Dantzler. I don't know. Maybe he's not building off of that momentum. Mackenzie Alexander looks fine. He looks exactly like I expected as well, although that's a positive sign, whereas for Peterson, that's a negative sign. He seems to be playing about what you'd expect an average slot corner to do. He's winning a lot of them, especially against BB. He's losing a couple of them, right? Like as you'd expect here and there. Bashad Breeland is not participating all that much, but when he does participate, it actually looks pretty good. There's like a possibility, honestly, and we're not going to really be able to genuinely explore it for a while unless Breeland wins the starting job from Dantzler, which I guess is also true. Like that's also possible. But we should already begin to open up a conversation where, and notice how many words I'm using to slow play this. Begin to open a conversation where there's a world where Bashad Breeland might be a better cornerback for the Vikings than Patrick Peterson. That's not out of the realm of possibility at the moment, based off of how they're playing in camp so far. When the season starts, that'll be a fun conversation to have. But I'm going to say right now, it's possible that he is. But yeah, the cornerback group is not looking phenomenal. It looks a lot better than last year, so they got that going for them. Harrison Hand, I haven't really gotten to see him do much yet, like just in terms of having positive plays. Like he was great in the spring session. Well, I don't know if this is translated positively or negatively yet into the training camp session. So yeah, Harrison Smith looks better than he did last year. He looks great. So it's safety. So that's good. Xavier Woods looks fine. It looks like he's still kind of learning the system because he's still making some communication errors. Cameron Bynum looks really fluid. He's still making a couple of mistakes here and there as he's learning the position, but he looks about as fluid and agile, and he's got as great change direction as you'd expect out of any safety. So that's nice to see. The rest of the safeties I'm not really feeling, but that's, like, who cares if like Luther Kirk is good or bad? Actually Luther Kirk specifically had a couple of good plays that Miles Dorn and Josh Metellus haven't yet, but like out of that group, I'm just like not super impressed.
Well, let's talk about something else you're not super impressed by. Let's talk about the kicker, who.
Oh gosh. Well, we skipped linebackers actually.
Oh, did we skip linebackers? Oh, let's quickly go through linebackers so that we can go to why people listen to this show, which is your hard-hitting kicker analysis.
Yeah, right. Of course. Anthony Barr looks really good. Eric Kendricks looks pretty good. I expect by the time the season starts, Kendricks will continue to be a better linebacker than Barr. At the moment, the small sample size I have linebackers says that Barr is playing a little bit better. Whatever, it's not a big deal. Nick Vigil seems to be kind of primarily a coverage guy. Still seems kind of out of place in run fits. Chaz Surratt playing better than I expected, given that he's a linebacker. Had a pick on day one, I think. Troy Dye playing a lot better than I expected, finding his way to get where he needs to be in terms of like things like run fits. Blake Lynch playing a lot better than I expected. Like really good in terms of coverage so far. So that's nice to see. I need to see him against the run a little bit more often to get kind of a good understanding of who he is. Tough Borland has that name. It's the second most interesting name after Case Cookus. But yeah, Tough Borland, better in coverage than I expected, but still like not amazing. Cameron Smith is not currently at the moment meeting my expectations. I thought he'd play a lot better. I feel weird criticizing him given his story. But I don't think that he's playing particularly well at the moment. I think Luke Braun tweeted out that like Cameron Smith is going where he needs to go and meeting his run fits. I don't know about that, but he certainly isn't doing it in coverage. And then Christian Ellis, he's the last linebacker for a reason. He's not making the team.
Well, how about the kicker? What ugliness are we seeing?
Get a new one.
Just start from scratch.
Don't wait for Riley Patterson to come off the pup. He's not your answer either. Get a new one. It's not Greg Joseph. So he missed two in the Saturday night practice. So he was 6 of 8, and some of those included extra points. But also, he missed a couple in the previous practice. I didn't get to see him in this practice. But even in the individual non-team drills, he missed a couple. He hit the pole without meaning. Sometimes the kickers will aim for the pole, and so if they do hit the upright, you don't automatically count that as a negative. But in this case, he was not intending to hit the upright, and he did that a couple of times. So I'm not feeling it.
Might be time to look at free agency.
Yeah, find Britton Colquitt, but the kicker version, whatever that is.
That's almost too bad. Before we go to the mailbag, who is the most surprising defensive player so far in camp positively?
Positively, maybe Patrick Jones. I don't know. Like if Harrison Hand had continued his spring performance here, I would like to say him or maybe Bashad Breeland. But I think it might be Patrick Jones. Just his ability to get in the backfield this early on is kind of nice to see. Because I thought the Vikings drafted the wrong Pitt edge rusher before the other one got charged. So I wasn't crazy impressed by Patrick Jones coming out, but he looks pretty good right now. So I'll say him positively.
Well, let's head over to the mailbag. And the first question is from Chris, who is asking about some of the COVID issues that have existed in the NFL and what could possibly happen as far as like a false positive thing. Chris asks, is there any kind of evidence that a vaccine might trigger a positive PED test? I'm trying to find any kind of legitimate justification for refusing to get one, knowing what happened last year and that the players had all the access in the world to them.
Chris, I understand you're reaching, you want a reason. Just know that it is not necessarily productive to get mad at individual players because you don't know kind of everything about them. But to get mad at the group of unvaccinated players at large is probably fair because there is not any evidence that I wouldn't even know how that would happen. but there's not any evidence that getting the vaccine would trigger positive PD, especially because if there was a chance, wow, would we have heard it? Like, there would be a lot more positive tests across the league right now. If that
Cole Beasley would have had 30 tweets on it.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, so we would have heard it. So I don't think that's the reason.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's hard to get mad at an individual player, but it is pretty easy to get mad at players at large. I think. I don't think there's a legitimate positive PED test reason.
Offbeat Skull Chant asks, does QB1 Browning qualify for Mr. Mankato?
I don't know. I'd have to take a look at Chris Long's. So Chris Long, the KSTP reporter, not Chris Long, the former Eagles pass rusher. I'd have to take a look at his Mr. Mankato odds. So he just published them on Score North like 5 days ago. I never really understand the criteria for Mr. Mankato. The idea that third round picks can even be included is nuts to me. But the player can't be an established NFL player, which is why KJ Osborne is eligible, even though like he returned a bunch of kicks last year. I imagine that Browning is, so he's on the list. Nate Browning and Nate Stanley and Jake Browning are both Mr. Mankato candidates. So, I think the betting is closed on the imaginary bookie that keeps track of all of this. But the odds are fairly long for Browning, and they're there. So you would have probably made out earlier if you could.
Ryan asks, given the continued abuse of the fans by the offensive line decision makers, is there any reason we shouldn't freak out about Dozier's prominence and Wyatt moving to center 3?
I think it's fair to freak out about Dozier's prominence. I think it is not. It doesn't fit to be upset about Wyatt moving to center because he's not moving to center. He just was taking snaps at center because one of their backup centers, Cole Cabral, has been continuously injured. So they still do have 3 centers, by the way. They've got, obviously, Garrett Bradbury. They've got Mason Cole as center 2, and then Kyle Hinton has cross-trained at center for a while, and so he could be center 3. But because they've had to move some people around because of various injuries and stuff like that, like the injury to Christian Darrisaw, and now Wyatt Davis, they've had to move a couple of players around, like Kyle Hinton to guard and stuff like that. So, no, this is just to I don't think that that's a big worry. This is just to see if you can do it. When Case Cookus, confirmed real person, wanted to practice getting some snaps in after practice, to get some extra work in, he asked the coach for a center, and they pulled Kyle Hinton out. So it's very clear that Hinton is more likely to be center 3 than Wyatt Davis. But yeah, Dozier's prominence, that's an issue. If Wyatt Davis is not ready to compete for that starting job, which based off of Zimmer's comments, he's not, that seems like a problem in evaluation or a problem in terms of priority. So yeah, that's an issue.
Also, from Ryan, given the positive feedback on the converted safety turned quarterback in San Francisco, has Arif developed a strategic action plan to take down his new bitter rival?
This one's tough. This one's he's generating a lot of hype. This Trey Lance character, this individual. And in order for me to effectively complete my vendetta, I'm going to have to celebrate his losses in a way that Charles McDonald doesn't call me a racist on Twitter. And so I'm going to have to navigate this one pretty tough. But, heroes rise to the occasion. I'm going to find a way to slander him without putting my foot in it, aside from him performing well. That's the only way I can put my foot in it.
So do you want me to bring like sparklers or something so that you can like celebrate with sparklers and cake every time he ends up losing? Or like,
mean, based on my takes, it's going to be a lot of sparklers and a lot of cake. I don't want to exhaust the Norse code budget.
Well, sparklers we have. I'll go halfsies on the cake, but like,
look, I think that we should. We should determine the size of the cake based off of the number of losses. So by the end of it, we'll buy a cake celebrating his losses by the end of the year.
We're just gonna Like, all right.
Yeah, so if it's a 17-loss season, it's going to be way too much cake.
Oh, that's you're looking at a full sheet, and that's too much.
Yeah.
Too much of a good thing. Kyle Slaby asks, why is everyone mad at Kirk Cousins for not getting a vaccine? I happen to know he regularly updates Avast and avoids suspicious website links. It's not his fault human viruses cannot affect his cold, lifeless robot body.
Oh my God. Okay. All right, Slaby.
Also, who plays more non-special team snaps for the Vikings this season? KJ Osborne or Harrison Hand? Has the minicamp hype been borne out so far?
KJ Osborne, because Harrison Hand is like the fifth corner. Like it would just be tough for Harrison Hand to see the field. KJ Osborne is on a path to win the third receiver job, which would give him a couple of starts and a lot of snaps. So I think that it's by far KJ Osborne. So one of the beat writers approached another beat writer today with a bet: who's going to have more pass attempts in 2021, Case Cookus or Dalvin Cook? Which I thought was hilarious. The answer is Dalvin Cook, or more likely Dalvin Cook. But man, like the thing with like Danny Etling and Case Cookus is that there are going to be 40 quarterbacks cut this year, like in a month, that were all ahead of them on the depth chart, right? Like Cookus and Etling could not make a roster above 40 guys were about to be cut. So when there's an emergency, when the Broncos quarterback room comes down with COVID, but this time they have time to sign a guy, they're not going to sign Cookus. They're going to sign one of the 40 guys that just got cut. So it's going to be Dalvin Cook, but it's a great bet, I think.
Matt Freeze, will Arif or another beat reporter be standing outside of the COVID-19 testing line tomorrow morning to report on which players are not vaccinated? And if no one is going, why is Arif afraid to be great?
All right. Okay. So one at a time. One, Mike Zimmer was not genuinely inviting the media to go to the testing tent and scope out who's getting tested. I just want to make that clear because there's at least one person on Twitter who seems to think that, at least one person who thinks that that's a genuine invite and not like he's just joking. Like he was just saying, yeah. I mean, you could just see. So someone asked, like, I don't understand this vaccine stuff. Why not just get the players tested every day or whatever? And Zimmer's like, they do get tested every day. You could just go to the tent and see it, right? Like that's what he meant. Like in theory, you would be able to see it, but he's not inviting us to go. So that's one. Two, I'm not afraid of greatness. I'm already great. I'm the greatest cornerback to ever play the game, obviously.
Have you seen the footage that he uploaded?
Come on.
Wasn't edited at all. Though, if we're talking about this same thing, for a question from Andrew, for Arif's passive-aggressive corner, what is the best passive-aggressive play Mike Zimmer could use to get more players vaccinated?
Man, he got pretty close with some people just don't understand, I guess.
Between that and my favorite was, admittedly, the comment about, check out who's waiting in their cars in the morning. Like, that is no F's no F's at all at all for Zimmer. That's scorched earth right there. Like, I don't care. You guys need to take care of yourselves.
Yeah, so I don't know if you could get more passive aggressive, right? Like I guess he could, in theory, have some celebratory cake inside an enclosed room in the facility, and there's only enough for the number of players that are vaccinated. And because of the vaccination protocols, the unvaccinated players would not be able to go in there until later and like spaced out like one at a time. And so the unvaccinated players can all be in there together and eat, the cake or whatever, right? But that's it. That's all I can think of. And those players are probably going to save some cake for their unvaccinated friends.
Are you hungry, Arif? You're stuck on cake.
You brought up the cake.
Yeah, I know, and now you're stuck on it.
No, it was just I actually thought of this particular scenario when I first saw the question. So there's nothing to do with. I just had dinner, man.
Back when you were still hungry. Okay. I don't want to get you when you're hangry here. We'll move on.
That's my brother. Thank you.
Well, Okay, that is true. Actually, I have seen your brother in a hangry situation, and it wasn't positive. Andrew Shad asks, any indication from practice time allotment which situational football Zimmer is focusing on this year?
We don't really quite know yet. Obviously, Zimmer spent a lot of time in some previous years working on the 2-minute drill and stuff like that. We're seeing a little bit of that. But I don't know. In some years, there's been an emphasis on red zone. I don't know that we have thus far, this early into camp, seen a particular emphasis on third down, red zone, 2-minute, what have you, 4-minute. I don't know. If I had to pick one, and this would be very soft, I'd say it's third down. But yeah, they're not doing any particular situational drill. It seems like more than typical, like they have in previous years.
Next question is from Michael, who asks, if the Vikings at some point this season face a game without a viable quarterback one because of COVID protocols, in what ways can we see this offense get creative with play calling? Really, like Cook under center?
Yeah. So, like, I don't know if this was like a sort of like disbelief, disgust kind of thing. Really, Cook under center? But yeah, man, like, yeah, Cook under center. Like, if you don't get a quarter, like that's exactly what the Broncos did when they had to play Kendall Hinton, right? Like, they put their running back under center and ran Wildcat. So the Vikings did a little bit of that. It was more successful than having Kendall Hinton throw, right? And the Vikings won Wildcat snap in the Saturday practice. I mean, without tackling, you can never tell. But to me, it looked super effective, right? Having Madison take the carry. So Cook, so in this one, it was a gun split with Cook taking the snap. So you had CJ Ham on one side and you had Alexander Madison on the other side. Cook takes the snap, reads the defensive end to see whether or not he should keep the ball or hand it off. He hands it off. CJ Ham lead blocks. And it looked to me like it was like a 40-plus yard touchdown. But again, you can't tell because of tackling. So yeah, sure. Great. Good job. I just think we'll see a lot of creative play calling. I'm going to write a piece it's just going to be a notebook. So it's not going to be huge, but I'm going to talk about some of the offensive and defensive wrinkles I've seen that are like fairly interesting and somewhat unique to this year.
Next question is going to be from Skoll, who asks, are you not allowed to cut players who are on the COVID-19 list? Because that's the only reason I can come up with as to why Nate Stanley hasn't already been released. Or really any other bubble players who refuse to be vaccinated.
I actually don't think that there is something that so there is something that prevents you from just cutting someone on injured reserve, aside from like human decency. And that's that you have to pay out the rest of their contracts. You might as well just have them on injured reserve. And that's why injury settlements occur, because players and their agents believe that they'll be able to return to action sooner than the team does. And that disagreement creates an injury settlement where they essentially kind of meet in the middle and pay the amount that the player thinks that they'll be out for, and plus maybe a little bit more. And then the player has to pay back. If they sign with a team, they have to pay back any extra time that they didn't actually miss, or something like along those lines. So the injury settlement occurs because you cannot just straight up cut a player. You have to arbitrate with them about how much you're going to be able to pay them when they're on an injured reserve. I don't think that there's a process for that for COVID-19 because you're not really missing a game week or anything like that. If you're on the COVID-19 reserve list, but maybe you would have to cut out an injury settlement. I don't know. But yeah, I think maybe that there's a restriction. Maybe that was kind of negotiated with the union. If Nate Stanley comes back and then gets cut right away, then we'll know that you can't cut somebody on the COVID-19 list. They waited until he was cuttable to cut him. But boy, Cookus did not look great. Not fair, like, because he's just learning the offense. But like, if it was between that and Nate Stanley, I mean, probably just not watch football. But if you had to pick a quarterback, it's Nate Stanley.
Nolan Kaler asks, question for North Code.
God, again.
When Vernon Adams takes over as the rightful QB1, how will Clint have to change the scheme for him to succeed? Will the biggest challenge be to keep reminding him that he has another down on the field?
I mean, he's played more American football than Canadian football in his life. It wouldn't be that difficult to revert. I think so. The bigger challenge, also a joke, but the bigger challenge would be to remind him that there's 11 players on the field and not 12. But how would you change the scheme? You'd probably let him run around a little, right? That's the genuine answer. But the Canadian football answer, I think, is more you can't run forward at the snap than it is there's another down.
Dr. Aaron Matson asks, what changes would the NFL need to make to its rules to make its trade deadline as interesting as other sports? I'm assuming it's mostly cap stuff and lack of minor leagues.
I mean, part of it's also that, like, in baseball, you don't really have to learn the scheme, right? Like, obviously, there's, like, stuff that's specific to the team, like, what situations they want to bunt, their ability to read the signs from the manager or whatever.
Whether or not they use trash cans in the back of the arena.
What the secret codes are from the trash cans.
Yeah.
Obviously, I don't know that much about baseball, but like one of the reasons trading is easier is because like your job is to hit the ball now, so do that, and not like you have to run a 15-yard out when we say the word Texas, right? Like it's just more difficult to acclimate to a scheme. Is part of the reason. Another reason, of course, is what amount of money the team retains in a trade versus sends over, and what the cap ramifications are of a trade. That's part of it. The minor league thing kind of makes sense, but the draft picks somewhat replace it. But I get what you're saying is that there's just less capital to trade. I think the thing that would make the trade deadline as interesting as other sports is the ability to trade cap space away. That would make it so much more interesting. And I think you'd get a couple more trades. But for the most part, it'd just be interesting. Just be like, yeah, man, they've got a $30 million smaller cap because they traded it away to get a draft pick, I guess.
Well, I mean, we were joking before about when Cleveland went all out
because they effectively did it.
Yeah, they made an NBA style trade for Brock, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, they received a second round pick, right? Yep. To trade a nobody for Brock Osweiler, and nobody else would have. Yeah, I mean, because you packaged Brock with a second round pick for somebody not worth a second round pick, meaning that they effectively traded their cap space away to the Texans. Which, boy, did the Texans use that well.
And continue to do so. But yeah, the Browns did, like, it is rare, but the Browns did pull off an NBA style trade in the NFL. It didn't do either team very much good, but it was something that was possible. So
yeah, but I think being able to directly trade allotted cap room, that would make it much more interesting.
Don from Ohio asks, for a Reef's outdoor/nature photography corner, I've always had a hard time taking pictures of animals in the woods and /open fields without scaring them off. What is a Reef's secret on getting great videos and pictures of those in their natural habitat while not scaring them off? Is it being short?
Look, man, if people want to knock me for the videos I have of camp where there's a little bit of shrubbery in the foreground, get a credential. Take the video yourself, man. I'm working with a phone. Do you want the videos or not, Don?
Oh.
Come on, man.
I did hear Richard Attenborough's voice in my head as some of those videos were being posted.
Yeah, I mean, so technically there is an option for me to be able to record with my phone in 4K and then zoom in and crop out all the. That sounds like way too much work, man. There's another play happening in 10 seconds. Not doing it.
Also from Don from Ohio, is Arif surprised Wentz's injury is not season-ending, or does he have faith something else will go wrong in his NDSU body to cause it to shut down for the year? For those who didn't hear today, it was announced that Mr. Carson Wentz is opting for the surgery for an injury that likely has been bothering him since high school. He just didn't know it. It just hadn't bothered him that badly.
I guess not bothering him, like, is maybe not the right, that he had.
Yeah, that he had
not necessarily in his foot. That it was bothering him.
Yeah. And foot injuries are tricky enough as it is, because you end up having a foot injury like this. It is something that it takes a little bit of time to get to be healthy, even after the expected wait period of they were saying some really wild periods of time that this could take. But even after that, you're still not really right immediately.
Yeah. I'm not entirely sure kind of what. So the issue was that he had like some like a shard of bone or whatever in his foot that finally got kind of like dislodged or whatever, which is why it started bothering him. And the foot is notoriously, because there's like so many bones in your foot, it's notoriously difficult to like find breaks and stuff like that. So yeah, but like, the thing about this is that it probably prevents the Eagles from getting a first round pick from the Colts. Like the Colts might be able to play this. So if Carson Wentz is good, which we know is not the case, but if Carson Wentz is good, right, what ends up happening is that the Colts get to go to the playoffs, but Carson Wentz still takes under 70% of snaps. And they make the playoffs because of how good Carson Wentz is, right? That way they'd only have to trade a second round pick despite going to the playoffs. So either if Carson Wentz plays 75% of snaps, the Eagles get a first round pick. If he plays 70% of snaps and they go to the playoffs, then the Eagles get a first round pick. Those are the conditions, right? It could create a scenario where the Colts go to the playoffs without paying that first round pick. So Carson Wentz's last FU to the Eagles is to prevent them from getting the first round pick. And I think that's kind of gorgeous.
That there really is something North Dakota passive aggressive about that. Like, it's too bad for the injury, but the way it worked out is pretty sweet.
Right.
I can fully support a situation that leads to the Eagles getting screwed on this deal.
It's perfect.
100%. Good for him. Luke Braun asks, for a Reef's cornering corner, what's the best way to get rid of a raccoon?
There's like some meme here. Like there's some Twitter in-joke that Luke's referencing. I have no idea what it is. I'm not going to entertain it.
Just no. Flat out, no.
No.
I linked him the video of the Mayhem guy being a raccoon.
That's pretty good.
and just called it good. It's like I don't know how to get rid of them, but I've got this link, so maybe you can use that to do the Googling on the YouTubes. Sure. Finally, Keith asks, I'm commissioning a workplace fantasy league for the third year in a row, but I have struggled these past few years fostering any sort of fun engagement among its members in our group chat or in person. Any advice on manufacturing chaos or drama in our league?
Keith, did you like genuinely ask this, or are you like asking as a means of like setting up a promo for our league? Well, I mean, I appreciate it in either case.
In either case, what you really should do is institute the negative 25 point extra point rule, which we have over at the Norse Code League, and you can join that, and you can join the lottery to be picked for the league by emailing norsecodepodcast@gmail.com or DM the Norse Code Twitter account at NorseCodeDN, and just give me your email address. I'll put you into the lottery. Sounds good. You could just work on just a ridiculous rule. And that tends to bring people together, both positively and in hate. Which, I mean, that's, if you're looking to evoke emotions, that counts. So I would suggest an obscenely weird rule, like a quirk, and it might take a little bit of selling.
Rules like if a running back gets exactly 100 yards rushing, you lose 100 points. Like, that's funny.
Yeah. Just dumb stuff like that. We punish the kicker, but it doesn't mean that you have to just have the kicker be punished. There's plenty of different options. Even looking at...
There's that. Also, if it's a money league, you can do, like, weekly money contests. Like, whoever rosters, like, the highest scoring player gets, like... So everyone pays in $1, and then whoever... Or $2 or $5 or whatever the proportion of your money league is every week. And then whoever has the highest scoring player on the roster gets that pot, right? Or the highest scoring team or whatever. I mean, there's like ways to do it, but like the rule is very funny.
The best way to do it is to encourage engagement and encourage the people. Like they actually do need to check. Like in the Norse Code League, the rule is you have to start a kicker who is scheduled to play that day. Otherwise
you forfeit.
Otherwise, you forfeit. It's the way around the, well, I'm just not going to start a kicker thing. No. We thought of that. Give me a break. Give me a little bit of credit.
I am shocked at the number of people that think we're so idiotic to have not thought of that.
No.
Like, I would just not start a kicker. Die, you solved it. Crap.
You're going 0-12. Enjoy last place then. Like, fine. But yeah, it's the best way is to encourage engagement and make it so that that's something they have to check on, something they have to do. I've been in leagues that started defenses, not just defenses, defensive players. And that was weird. That was an interesting extra wrinkle. And I ended up winning the championship that year because nobody else seemed to know how to handle the defensive players. And I was just, I ended up picking a good corner. And I think it was Jared Allen the year that he nearly broke the record for sacks. So like there were ways, there were things you could do to make it work. So yeah, I would suggest an odd rule or trying to encourage the engagement of the actual like players themselves, the quote unquote GMs, and that should cause more people to be interested, more people to be like messaging, or worst case scenario, if you slip me $5, I'll give you Don from Ohio's information, and he can teach you how to be obnoxious. I think I just offered to sell information that was voluntarily given to me, but the problem is that it's Don, so I don't think anyone's going to mind this.
Yeah, right.
Plus, I feel like I'm giving Don more credit than I should, so maybe he'll be okay with it. That is going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Arif, what do you have to plug?
Yeah, I've got player notes up at The Athletic. I've got a review of Jake Browning's day as the sole quarterback. I'm going to have some upcoming pieces on the likelihood that the defense returns to form, some other notebooks, including that stuff I mentioned about like offensive and defensive wrinkles that are interesting that have just kind of popped up. So that's what's over going to be over at The Athletic.
All right. And just remember that the next episode we have is going to be the live show over at the Union 32 Craft House after 7 p.m. on Thursday, August 12th. We will be talking about the camp stuff. We'll also be previewing the first preseason game of the year against the Broncos. So if you like free stuff, I'll have a lot of free stuff to give out. A couple of t-shirts, a baby onesie, some stickers, and a ticket to the game itself. So if you're interested, head on over there. But for Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening. Hope to see you guys out on Thursday, August 12th over at the Union 32 Craft House. And please remember to punch reality right in the face. And we'll see you in Minneapolis. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's official Vikings blog, at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Stitcher, or wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan, and he can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. You can also find his written work at theathletic.com. I am your podcast host and producer, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN or my personal account at Big Mono. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can make your one-time donation at paypal.me/NorseCode, or you can make a recurring monthly contribution by visiting patreon.com/NorseCode. A donation of $3.50 per month does get you bonus material from the show and much more. Any questions or comments that won't fit in a tweet can be sent to norsecodepodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, we thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this. We go out, we hit people in the mouth.